We were talking about you, Carl, last week. We couldn't talk because you sent me an email that you are dealing with the issues that you're facing in Europe. Please let us know what is going on with the case of sanctions and what are the communication between you, or if there is some communications and
That's
the
that's that that's a very interesting because in fact I received a call on Friday the 12th. That means more than 10 days ago. That Radio Free Europe announced in an article that my name was to be on a list of sanctions in the framework of the sanctions against Russia, and that I was accused of being a Russian propagandist and things like that. I called my embassy right away. That was, as I repeat, Friday, the 12th of December. They had no time to talk to me. So I said, okay. And I explained everything, the whole issue, but apparently, well, they had no time for me. On the 15th, the EU issued the sanction list, which is in fact works as a notification, official notification. So then it became official that I was on the sanction list. Um, and this is it. In fact, I never got any warning on that. I was never asked anything about my activities. I had no opportunity to defend myself. I had no opportunity to object to the accusation against me. Um, I was, in fact, I was accused and sanctioned without any ability to defend myself in front of a court or whatsoever. The sanctions, by the way, are not a judicial sanction. This is the political sanctions. So this sanction that is made by the European Council, meaning it's a political body. It is and not a judicial. So it's not. That's the reason why there is no tribunal. Yeah, the the government, with quotation marks, the government of the EU decides that you are guilty, but there is no way you can express the fact that you are not. You get the sanction, then you can probably try to explain your case, and that's what I will do with lawyers and all that, to explain my case and made every effort to have the sanction removed or the sanction lifted, but uh, the sanction came without any difference. I mean, again, without contradictory discussion, whatever. So until, in fact, yesterday, because yesterday I got for the first time, that means one week after the EU decision, my government called me to say, well, uh, they gave me the website of the sanctions, which is very nice. And so they told me, okay, we are in touch. That's it. I don't know what they want to do. I don't know if they want to discuss my case with the European Union. I know nothing. So I received no pre-warning. Not the notification is, in fact, I was supposed to read what is on the website of the EU. Otherwise, I would have absolutely no information whatsoever, or no warning whatsoever that I was sanctioned. Um, I didn't receive any information, as I said, from the EU, from the Belgian authorities, because I am a resident in Belgium, and no information from the Swiss government, even if apparently the Swiss government had prior knowledge of that. Meaning, of course, the apparently, again, I say apparently, we have to be very careful with that, but apparently my name was brought on the sanction list by France. And it seems that France got in touch with the Swiss authorities to inform them, they would put a Swiss citizen on the request for sanctions. But Switzerland didn't inform me, and that happened probably end of November already. And but nobody deemed necessary to inform me about that or even question me. Um, so and up to yesterday, I mean, yesterday was the first time I received, let's say, a kind of official contact or a contact with an official. That's it. Otherwise, if I had no internet, I would not even know that I were sanctioned. The issue, so the consequence of that is that all my assets, financial assets in Belgium are frozen. That means I cannot buy anything, even to eat. I can even buy a piece of bread, for instance. This is simply that. So everything is frozen. And I am banned to travel in the EU, meaning that I'm not even allowed to go back to Switzerland, my country. Switzerland has not taken over this package of sanctions, meaning that in Switzerland, my assets, bank accounts, and all that are not frozen. And so I'm in a strange situation that staying in Belgium, where I have my house and everything, I cannot buy, I mean, I cannot live. I can go to Switzerland to have money, but I cannot go back to my place of residence. So it's a it's a
What's
Kafkaesque type of situation, and that's the situation. And apparently, I don't. So the consequence of that is of that situation at large is that it has triggered outrage in the whole of Europe, because now everybody knows me. I mean, I have appeared on your show and other shows many times. Everybody knows that I'm far from propagandist. Even always declined to be on Russian media. I mean, Russian official media, precisely because I didn't want my work to be understood as propaganda. And in my books, and I have mentioned that several times, and those who have my books have confirmed that in my books I use Western sources and Ukrainian sources in order to avoid being accused of propagating Russian propaganda. And it's not that I think that the Russian don't tell the truth. This is not what I mean, but it's the idea is that in the current mindset, the mood that we have in Europe, everything that comes from Russia is automatically wrong. Therefore, even if they tell the truth, that would discredit your work. And so I tried to be as objective as I can, because I'm not related to Russia whatsoever. You know, I don't have I'm not living there. I'm not working there. I don't have a girlfriend there. I've not family there. I've never been paid by Russia for that. So I tried to be absolutely objective. The same with Ukraine, by the way. The idea being that, as I have explained many times on several websites, that from the way you analyze or study or assess a crisis derives the way to solve the crisis. Therefore, you need to be objective as you can. And I recommend everybody to go to the blog of Larry Johnson on Sonar 21, where he published an article on me where the author said that you cannot find more objective than I am, meaning that the purpose of all that is to facilitate, of course, a peace talks. Because if you are not, if you are already biased when you want to address both parties, of course nobody will listen to you, and therefore you need to you need to be somewhat objective as far as you can. So the everybody knows that. because a lot of people have read my books, and I've appeared on several blogs and shows and all that, and therefore people are outraged. And I appear in many shows in Italy. Fortunately, I speak Italian, I speak German. Therefore, I have appeared in various shows in German, in Italy, in Italian, of course, in French, and a lot of people know me, and they all know that I try to be as objective and as honest as possible in analyzing the conflict, and therefore that triggered a lot of response. And now you have a lot of I mean, even in the German parliament, there was a question asked to the German government specifically on me. That's very interesting, because you have several people in the same sanctioned list. But apparently, within all the people that are on the list, only my case has retained the attention of people, because people know that I'm objective. And this is what I just received just minutes ago, an email a European parliamentarian who will fight for it, because he said, well, if he was talking to me, he was saying, if you are accused and sanctioned for something, that means that any citizen in the EU can be in the same case. And that's why this case is very serious. In fact, despite the fact that it, of course, I'm the first targeted and concerned by the case. But beyond that, it shows the arbitrary type of decision that can be taken by the European government. And it addresses, of course, also some structural questions and functional questions, because I'm UN expert of the rule of law, and in the rule of law, you I mean, basically, I mean, in a very simplified way, the idea is that you make the distinction between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary branch of the state. And essentially, every democratic state is based on those three pillars. And all those three pillars controls the other, or check the others, so that you have this kind of a circular check that ensures that democracy is guaranteed, so that democracy works with on this idea of the separation of power, as we said. Now, in the EU, and that's the strange thing, that the sanction I'm subject to is not delivered by the judiciary power; it's delivered by the executive branch, and and the sanctions themselves are crafted by the executive, meaning that the executive takes over the task of the legislative and the task of the judiciary. In a nutshell, the executive concentrates all the three powers in itself. And that's exactly the definition of the dictatorship, when all the three powers, sorry, are concentrated on in one point. So that's why this case is at various level. My case is extremely concerning, because it shows how the EU can take decision, I mean, apply sanctions on individuals within the EU without having any basis, or judicial or legal basis. It's just a pure political decision, period. And that raises, of course, a lot of questions. The Because I have breached, there is no law, whether in the EU, nor in Belgium where I live, or in Switzerland, or wherever in Europe, that outlaws propaganda. Even if I were a propagandist, which I made every effort to avoid to be that, because as I explained, but even if I were a propagandist, there's no law that prohibits that. I'm also accused of appearing on pro-Russian website or sites or videos or whatever, or shows better said. What is a pro-Russian show? Is your show pro-Russian? You see, and again, even if that qualification is not defined, because what does it mean? Uh, is John Mersheimer or others are they pro-Russian? That this is just academic work. Period. I'm an analyst. I'm nothing else. In any case, we have a concept which is not defined, which is not prohibited by law in any case. Even if it were defined, it would not be prohibited by law. And in addition to that, I'm accused of implementing disinformation strategies attributable to Russia. So they don't even know if this disinformation can be attributed to Russia. When you put everything together, you start asking you, where is common sense in that? I mean, uh, putting aside legality and all these kind of things, and justice simply. So this is, we see that we have an accusation here which is extremely flimsy, vague, unsubstantiated, um, even false, I would say. And sorry, I got called from all over the world, and um, with consequences, personal consequence. And it's very interesting because those sanctions were initially probably crafted for people living outside of the EU. That's why, if, of course, if you have an oligarch somewhere in Russia or wherever, or some billionaire somewhere in the world, and he got sanctions and his asset is frozen in Europe, okay, it's probably a problem for the guy, but I mean, he can still live. I have in the same list, there is a French officer whom I know, by the way, Xavier Moreau, um, who lives in Russia. So his assets in Europe are also frozen, but he lives in Moscow. So his assets so he can live normally, basically. Will probably have some problems if he wants to go back to France. But since he's living there with his family in Moscow, it doesn't make any difference. The problem, my case is different because I'm living in the EU with sanctions that are crafted for people living outside of the EU, meaning that, as I explained, the result is that I'm not even allowed to buy food. Simply that. So they might have some exemptions or things like that, but I have to ask. Basically, I should ask to have the right to buy food. We are in a very, I mean, this is interesting because last week I was interviewed by a German journalist, and incidentally, this guy I mean, he grew up in East Germany, I mean, in communist Germany. And he told me, well, in East Germany, we had the same thing. But the difference is that in East Germany, people were warned before they would have been sanctioned. So, meaning that we don't even reach the level of East Germany. You see, and that's, of course, for a lot of people is extremely concerning. Not just for me, and I have a lot of people, and really all the time I have people calling me and asking how they can help and all that. And that's very nice, by the way. And I have to thank all those who are concerned about my case and all that. I really I'm very grateful for all those who demonstrated their friendship and their interest and their concern and all that. Um, and since I'm not on social networks, not even LinkedIn, for those who, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, but I'm not active. So some people might be disappointed if they write on me to me on LinkedIn. But I'm totally inactive on social media. Um, in any case, a lot of people have expressed their concern about me, and again, I'm very grateful about this. Uh, the point with that is that this is a little bit the same thing that we have seen with Assange.
Mm,
That it is, at the end of the day, this is a case that has an impact on all of us. And for that reason, I think, again, beyond my particular case, it's something we should be very worried about, because it shows. And incidentally, you may remember that just a couple of weeks ago, and probably we discussed that with you on your show, I don't remember, but you remember that the US just issued their national security strategy, where they precisely said that Europe was drifting towards dictatorship or something like that. And here we are. We are exactly in the same case. So in Europe, the this U.S. strategy was received with some kind of irony, and the Europeans were saying, this is Trump and all that. So they were kind of smiling at that, like an exaggeration. And now, just a couple of days later, you have exactly the demonstration of that, with a case where someone can be deprived of freedom of movement, deprived of freedom of speech, deprived of its financial assets, with no ability to defend himself, with no ability to have a case, to defend his case in front of a tribunal, who didn't breach any law whatsoever, and he's kind of sanctioned. Well, you can ask yourself, well, Europe is struggling against Palestinians, Russia, Iran, you name it, China, because Europe has values.
mm,
Now, you can decide by yourself what kind of values are there. And as I have said that, I think, on your show a couple of times, I'm a Cold Warrior, so I have experience. I was in the intelligence during the Cold War. In the Cold War, you had, I mean, obviously cold, but still a war between East and West, between the liberal society in the West and the Marxist type of society in the East. But we never prohibited people to read Pravda. I mean, you could buy the Pravda in the news outlets in Switzerland, in France, everywhere. Literaturne Gazzetta, and so on and so forth. Meaning that at that time, and nobody was sanctioned for that. I mean, we had Communist Party, take France, take many countries. You had actual uh, Communist Party, and people were not deprived of freedom because they had the same ideology of the Soviets. So what happened? And that's the interesting question, because we were at war, but we were not afraid of those people who didn't express the same opinion as our governments. We didn't need to punish them. We didn't need to sanction them. We didn't need to remove their assets or their freedom of movement or whatever, because we were confident that we had the best system. We were confident that at the end of the day we would prevail. We were confident that the system of having freedom of speech, of all that, is stronger than having a society where freedom of speech and so on is repressed. We were confident. It was the kind of type of I would say informational Darwinism. The stronger wins, not because of strength, but because he's the most acceptable, the one that makes the most common sense, the one that is more natural. And therefore we would, in that case, you're not afraid of other type of information. My best friends have been people who had a completely different opinion as me, and I didn't need to treat them as enemies because I'm confident that I have good ideas and good argument and all that. So I don't need to treat this person as an enemy. We can even probably take advantage of some ideas or some suggestion or some opinions that he has or had. And that's what who I always considered people. So of course I was born in Switzerland, and in my country it used to be the case. Apparently it's no longer the case, but it used to be the case that we accepted opinions of others. But now, if you read the Swiss French media, some journalists are happy that I'm sanctioned because I'm pro-Russian, so I deserve a sanction. And those journalists are supposed to be in favor of free speech. We can ask ourselves, and that applies to most of the journalists in the Swiss French media. So very strange. And so I think it's interesting because it shows kind of evolution of the current situation we have in Europe today. That because we tend to have leaders who make poor decisions, who are probably insecure because of their poor ability to assess situation, to take decisions. They take decisions based on tweets rather than on uh, uh, careful analysis and long-term thinking and things like that. So it's always short-term, and that explains that some of those presidents, Macron or others, flip-flop all the time because they take a decision. Now it's A and tomorrow it's B on the same subject, showing that their decision making is not as it should be. It's not a proper decision making. They just deliver an opinion, a very the opinion they had at this point of time, but it's not the result of, as I said, careful study of the case. As a result, of course, those people are insecure. That's the reason they don't really trust what their own decisions, and that's why they have to protect those decisions. And that's probably exactly what we had during at the end of the Cold War. I mean, not just at the end, but during the Cold War in the Soviet Union or so, because they knew that the system was fragile. That a system that is based only on coercion cannot last long. And therefore, you need to have a system that prevents any distortion, any disturbance, any dissent within the system. And that's why you had to have a control over over speech, over media, over all that.